The Armenian princes, long oppressed by both Byzantines and Turks, provided food, guides, and information about the road ahead. It was here that the first cracks in Crusader unity appeared. Baldwin of Boulogne, Godfrey's younger brother, broke away from the main army with a small force. Marching east to Edessa, he manoeuvred himself into position as heir to the elderly Armenian ruler. When the old prince died under suspicious circumstances, Baldwin became Count of Edessa, the first Crusader state. Meanwhile, the Mainz army faced its greatest challenge yet, Antioch, the mighty city that guarded the road to Syria. Its walls stretched for miles, studded with 400 towers. Its garrison was strong, its supplies plentiful. Taking it would require a siege of unprecedented scale. As October 1097 dawned, the Crusaders made camp before Antioch's walls. They had marched 2,000 miles, fought desperate battles, survived unimaginable hardships, but their greatest trials lay ahead. The city that had once been the birthplace of the word Christian would test their faith, their unity, and their will to continue. Behind those walls, the Turkish governor, Yagi Sian, watched and waited. He had sent messages throughout the Muslim world. The Franks are here in force. The jihad must begin, or all Syria will fall. Help was coming, he knew. The question was whether it would arrive before the Crusaders found a way through his impregnable walls. The stage was set for one of the longest, bloodiest sieges in medieval history. Before it ended, heroes would become villains. Faith would wrestle with desperation, and the crusade would nearly destroy itself. Antioch would make or break the march to Jerusalem. For 8 months, the Crusaders sat before the walls of Antioch like beggars at a rich man's gate. 8 months of hunger, disease, desperation, and death. 8 months that would transform heroes into cannibals and saints into cynics. If Jerusalem was the dream, Antioch was the nightmare that nearly ended it all. The city mocked them with its strength. Its walls, built by the Byzantine Emperor Justinian and improved by generations of Arab engineers, stretched for 12 miles around mountain slopes and river valleys. The Crusaders, perhaps 20,000 fighting men by now, couldn't even surround it properly. Supplies flowed in through gates they couldn't reach. Messages went out calling for relief armies from Damascus, Aleppo, and Mosul. Winter came early in 1097, and it was merciless. Rain turned the camps into swamps. Tents rotted, armor rusted. Men who had survived the desert heat of Anatolia now died of cold in their sleep. The price of food soared until a single egg cost more than a peasant earned in a month. Knights ate their war horses. Common soldiers ate rats, dogs, leather straps, anything that might fill their bellies. Stephen of Blois, one of the wealthiest crusaders, wrote to his wife, Adela, "Before Antioch we suffer such tribulation and distress as I cannot describe. Many of our men have died of hunger, despite all our wealth. A loaf of bread costs a bezant. I am ruined, having spent everything on food for my men." The Muslim chronicler Ibn al-Athir later recorded what his sources told him. The Franks suffered terribly. They ate carrion and leaves. Their nobles could be seen wandering the camps, begging for scraps. Some were reduced to cannibalism, eating the flesh of dead Turks after battles. This last detail, shocking as it sounds, appears in multiple sources. During a particularly desperate period, some crusaders at the town of Ma'ara would indeed resort to eating enemy dead. The trauma of Antioch drove men to acts they would never have imagined in their comfortable European homes. Inside the city, Yagi Sian played a careful game. He knew help was coming, but didn't know when. His garrison was strong but outnumbered, so he used psychological warfare, allowing his men to taunt the Crusaders from the walls, displaying food and treasure the starving Christians couldn't reach. Worse for the Crusaders, they faced a two-front war. Ridwan of Aleppo and Dukak of Damascus, normally bitter rivals, put aside their differences to send relief forces. The Crusaders found themselves fighting off attacks from outside while maintaining their siege. Each battle depleted their strength. Each victory was Pyrrhic. Desertion became epidemic. Peter the Hermit himself, the man whose preaching had launched the People's Crusade, tried to flee but was caught and brought back in disgrace. Stephen of Blois, claiming illness, abandoned the siege entirely, carrying back to Europe tales of inevitable defeat. Even William the Conqueror's son, Robert of Normandy, considered leaving. It was Bohemond who saved them, through treachery that would have made his Norman ancestors proud. The ambitious prince had been secretly negotiating with a tower commander named Firuz, an Armenian Christian who had converted to Islam but nursed secret grievances against Yaghi Sian. The price of betrayal was steep. Bohemond would get Antioch for himself if his plan succeeded. On the night of June 2nd, 1098, Firuz opened his section of the walls. Bohemond's men scaled the towers in darkness, killing the guards silently. By dawn, Crusader banners flew over Antioch. The garrison, caught completely by surprise, fled or died in the streets. The 8-month siege was over. But liberation became massacre. 8 months of suffering demanded payment in blood. The Crusaders rampaged through Antioch, killing Muslims and Christians alike in their fury. Yaghi Sian fled, but was caught and beheaded by Armenian peasants. His head was brought to the Crusaders as a trophy. Raymond of Aguilé, a priest who witnessed the sack, wrote with disturbing enthusiasm, "In the streets, in the houses, in the temples, on the rooftops, there was nothing but killing. One could not walk without stepping on corpses. By evening, the city was carpeted with dead bodies." The Crusaders had barely finished their slaughter when terrible news arrived. Kerboga, the fearsome governor of Mosul, was approaching with the largest Muslim army yet assembled, perhaps 75,000 men. The besiegers were about to become the besieged. Within days, Kerboga's army surrounded Antioch. The Crusaders were trapped in a city they had just devastated, with little food and many enemies among the surviving population. Morale collapsed utterly. Men threw themselves from the walls rather than face slow starvation. Others converted to Islam hoping for mercy. It was then in their darkest hour that a miracle occurred. Or was it a fraud? A poor pilgrim named Peter Bartholomew claimed that St. Andrew had appeared to him in a vision, revealing that the Holy Lance, the spear that had pierced Christ's side, was buried beneath the floor of Antioch's cathedral. The leaders were sceptical. Adhemar of Le Puy, the papal legate, openly doubted, but Raymond of Toulouse, desperate for anything that might restore morale, ordered excavations. After a day of digging, found nothing, Peter Bartholomew jumped into the pit himself and emerged clutching a piece of ancient iron. Real or fake, the effect was electric. The Holy Lance became a rallying point, proof that God had not abandoned them. Men who had been ready to surrender now demanded to fight. Even the skeptics kept quiet, recognizing that belief might be more important than truth. On June 28th, the Crusaders did the impossible. Starving, outnumbered 3-1, they opened the gates and marched out to battle. They arranged themselves in divisions, each following a great lord's banner, with the Holy Lance carried at the fore. Kerboga, confident in his numbers, allowed them to deploy fully before attacking. It was a fatal mistake. The Crusaders, driven by religious ecstasy and desperation, fought like men possessed. When Kerboga's coalition began to waver, with emirs abandoning the field due to internal rivalries, the Muslim army collapsed. The victory was so complete, so unexpected, that many saw it as divine intervention. Angels had been seen fighting alongside the Crusaders, they claimed. Saints had appeared in the sky. God himself had granted victory to his chosen warriors. But the aftermath was bitter. The princes immediately fell to quarrelling over who should rule Antioch. Bohemond claimed it by right of conquest and prior agreement. Raymond insisted it should be returned to Emperor Alexios. The dispute paralyzed the crusade for months. Meanwhile, a plague swept through the army, killing thousands who had survived battle and siege. Among the dead was Adhemar of Le Puy, the one leader everyone respected. Without his moderating influence, the divisions grew worse. The common soldiers grew restless. They had not marched thousands of miles to see their leaders become petty warlords. In a remarkable display of popular pressure, they forced the princes to resume the march to Jerusalem. But the army that left Antioch in January 1099 was a shadow of what had entered Asia Minor. Perhaps 12,000 fighting men remained, plus a ragged tale of pilgrims and camp followers. They had learned hard lessons about Eastern warfare, about the price of their quest. The naive enthusiasm of Clermont was gone, replaced by grim determination. As they marched south along the Syrian coast, Muslim resistance melted away. The emirs of Shaizar, Homs and Tripoli, terrified by what had happened at Antioch, offered tribute and safe passage. They wanted these dangerous fanatics gone, not martyred on their walls. The Crusaders were happy to accept. They were tired of siege warfare, tired of politics, tired of everything but their original goal. Jerusalem beckoned, now only weeks away. The city they had dreamed of, prayed for, suffered for, was finally within reach. Behind them, Antioch remained in Bohemond's hands, the second Crusader state after Baldwin's Edessa. The Norman adventurer had achieved his ambition, trading Jerusalem for earthly power. But for the rest, the pilgrimage continued. They were fewer now, harder, perhaps wiser. The warriors who approached Jerusalem in the summer of 1099 were not the same men who had taken the cross at Clermont. They had been tempered in the forge of Antioch, transformed by suffering into something new, the first generation of Crusaders, men who had learned that faith alone was not enough, that God's will required human blood and iron to enforce. The holy city awaited, and with it the climax of their long journey and the birth of a legend that would echo through centuries. On the morning of June 7th, 1099, a Provençal knight named Gaston climbed a hill called Montchoix and saw what thousands had died to reach. "Jerusalem," he cried, and the word rippled back through the ragged column like a prayer finally answered. Men who had marched in grim silence for days fell to their knees. Hardened warriors wept like children. Some kissed the ground. Others raised their arms to heaven, praising God for allowing them to live to see this moment. Jerusalem the golden, Jerusalem the holy, Jerusalem the centre of the world lay before them, its limestone walls glowing in the morning sun. After 3 years of unimaginable hardship, they had reached the city where Christ had walked, taught, died and risen. Every suffering along the way, every friend lost, every temptation overcome, had led to this. But between the Crusaders and their goal stood walls 30 feet high, defended by a capable garrison under Iftikhar ad-Dawla, the Fatimid governor. The Egyptian Fatimids had retaken Jerusalem from the Seljuks just a year before, and they had no intention of surrendering it to these Frankish barbarians. The Crusaders numbered fewer than 1,300 knights and 12,000 foot soldiers. Inside Jerusalem waited a garrison of similar size, plus thousands of armed citizens. The Christians and Jews of the city had been expelled, Iftikhar fearing they might aid their co-religionists. The wells outside the walls had been poisoned. The countryside had been stripped of supplies. It should have been another Antioch, another grinding siege that would destroy the Crusaders through attrition. But these men were beyond ordinary calculation now. They had not come so far to fail, within sight of their goal. Jerusalem would fall, they swore, or they would die beneath its walls.